And welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co host, Marissa Roy. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about what is the missing piece to your weight loss puzzle.
Yeah. So we're going to reveal the secrets and but in all seriousness we're going to kind of go through the list of things that everyone that we talk to seems to feel is missing. And I feel like especially the type of person that I am, I veered towards the side of like I am the problem. Like there's kind of two extremes. It's like I'm the problem or like something else is the problem and I need to be fixed. And so I was always the former. And I was like, I don't have enough discipline. I don't have enough willpower. I don't have enough motivation. And I just can't keep my shit together. And I was like, I keep overeating. I can't stick to my diet. I can't do these things. What is wrong with me? And what is missing from me? And I kept thinking it's discipline. So I'd read books on like discipline and and internal growth and willpower, like David Goggins style, like just do it. And it's not quite that. So we'll get into why that is.
I was the same way. Like I'd read, and again, I am dating myself a little bit because when I was in my big health and fitness journey, it was like Oxygen magazine, right? Like that was like the big thing. You got your information from magazines. And yeah, it was just like, I'm just not eating clean enough. I just like carbs too much. Like it was, I felt the same. I was like, it's a me problem. I just need to get to the gym more. And that's when I got into a really dangerous spot with exercise and nutrition where, and I know you feel the same way, where it's like we became obsessed with everything that we ate. And like was borderline like orthorexic for a little bit, like really unhealthy like view on foods and processed foods. And I'd make all these comments to my family when they'd like open their pantry. I was not a fun person to be around when I was like in this era. Like I guilt them into like what they were eating, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to the gym. I like my routine was I would literally get up, go to my apartment complex gym at in college. I would do hit cardio. I'd
Nice.
come home, fasted hit cardio. I'd come home.
Oh,
I know, and I'd have like a protein shake or like rice cakes and peanut butter. And then I'd go to class and I'd have like a salad. And then I'd come home and I'd run another 2 or 3 miles and then I would do weights. So I was literally doing that every single day. And yeah, I lost a lot of weight,
oh
but
yeah.
I also looked not healthy. And I had a really, really poor relationship with food. And then all the stuff that I would make people feel bad about eating, I'd go and binge at night or on the weekends.
Yeah.
And so it was just not healthy. But at the end of the day, I thought I was a problem. I just need to do something more extreme.
Yeah. Because and the thing is too is like it's reinforcing the wrong, like you're reinforcing it the whole time, because when we do these extreme things we are seeing results and progress per se, but in such an unhealthy way. But it reinforces the fact that this thing works, right? And everybody knows that if you maybe not everybody, but a lot of people know that if you restrict your calories and food groups and carbs and sugar and do cardio, then you'll lose weight. Because yes, we've done it before and that's how it's worked. But the reality is that's not the only way. And I think we always just veer more towards the more side of things versus actually looking at something strategically. Or the total opposite end of the spectrum is it's not me, it's something else. And then we point the fingers elsewhere. So I see this a lot. And this is like really touchy. It's hard to like even say this example, but it's not me, it's my hormones. It's not me, it's my medication. It's not me, it's my life situation. It's not me, it's my circumstances. It's not me, it's the diet that I did. It's not me, it's the coach that I hired. It's not me, it's the personal training that didn't work. It's the article online that didn't work. It's the guide that I downloaded. it's all these things that didn't work for me. And it's like shifting of the blame, where there's still some like internal to that, because it's like maybe it's your body that's working against you, or it's something that you did, but ultimately it's the fact that we don't feel like we have the control. Right. And so the first one is, I have all the control, I'm just not doing it. And the second one is, something is working against me that I don't have any control over. And that's really hard, because then we are in a victim mentality and we feel helpless. And so we're not taking any action to get out of it, because we feel like it's not even our actions that got us in there in the first place. And that's really dangerous too, because whether or not that's true, like your hormones could absolutely be off and dysregulated and causing problems. Your medications absolutely could be doing that. But it's getting so deep into the mentality of that like hurts us, because we're not doing anything about it. And also we are just seeing things in such a self-defeating way. It just breaks my heart, honestly, because I know a lot of people that have been or are in that position.
Yeah, it's like we need a nice healthy blend of those two approaches.
Yeah.
So it's like we can't play the victim and not do anything at all. We still, like, if your hormones are out of whack, or if you had a bad coach, it's like, well, you can still take steps to move in the right direction to get you to where you want to go. But you also don't need to follow a extreme protocol in order to get results, and need more willpower and dedication. Um, but yeah, both of those situations are really tough. But I like what you said earlier, because this is a lot of times what I see with clients, potential clients, is, well, keto worked for me, or this worked for me and it was extreme. And it's like, yes, but
It
where are
did.
you now? Right? Like, you've regained the weight. You couldn't sustain it. You are not able to eat that way for a long period of time. So we need to try to find a different approach.
Or it's a definition of, why are we saying it worked if we're
Hmm.
still here? Or,
Right.
we lost the weight before, but is it actually a success if you weren't able to keep it off? And
Right.
this is where, it just becomes individual. Like, you just cannot group everyone together and say this is how it works for everyone, because I have heard of stories and talked to people where they did something a little bit more extreme, and then kind of like they were able to mentally like dial it back, maintain it for like 5 years, 10 years, and then something happened in their life that changed the situation, and then they fell completely off and haven't been able to get back since. And so one of the key secrets to actually moving forward comes from a little something that kind of opposes the it's something else that happened to me, the victim mentality, something that opposes that, but not directly. It's not saying that, no, it is just all my responsibility. It is a word that a lot of people don't like. And I don't even like the word. And I've had a hard time, um, like really understanding this, but the word is acceptance. Accepting where you are, not as approval of like, this is okay, but accepting it, because if we don't accept it, then we're just constantly living in the past, right? Like, that shouldn't have happened. That happened to me, and I think like certain circumstances, whether it's like you blew out your knee, or you gained a bunch of weight from a new medication, or you hired a coach and it didn't go the way that you wanted it to. Like, if you hold remorse for that, then you're living in the past, versus like accepting, okay, that happened. I cannot control the fact that, like, I can't do anything about that now, essentially, right? The it is what it is mentality. It is done. Now what, right? And so if we don't learn how to accept where we are, then we're always just going to be hating where we are now because of the stuff that happened, rather than just like being in the now of like, okay, these are my current circumstances, and this is where it gets really tough, like mentally, physically. Maybe my physical abilities to go work out and get started again are different than they used to be, and I have trouble accepting that, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to jump back in, but then you're limited in X, Y, and Z ways, and then you feel discouraged and you don't even start in the first place. But if you had that acceptance, you could scale back to that actual spot that you're at. So that's
Right.
like a super big secret that I feel like, I mean, I've really just learned about recently from one of my coaches on my team, but it is a huge piece to the puzzle.
Yeah. Well, it's like I feel like this is more so for like guys, but it's like the guy in high school who like peaked and like or maybe like on the football team
Yeah.
and they like blew out their knee and they're like, "Oh, I could have gone pro, but this happened." And it's like, "Dude, you're 40." Like that was a long time ago and it's like no one wants to hear that anymore. And so that's not to say that if you're in this position, but it's like if you've been in this position for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and like you're still talking about like where
Yeah.
you were or that one coach that you hired 20 years ago, it's like everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
let's let's go." But I like the idea of acceptance because okay, we talking about the football player, it's like, okay, but if you had just accepted like this is my current situation, this is my reality, I blew out my knee and I'm not going to go pro, like what can I do now? Can
Yeah.
I use this story to motivate others to take care of their health and fitness so they don't end up like me? Like, like how are you going to use this to move you forward? You can't continue to stay stuck and not do anything.
And I'll say even on top of that, let's say it's not, a year after the person blew out their knee and they can't play football anymore, but it's 30 years down the line and they're 40 years old, 50 years old, they're still talking about it. How can that person come to acceptance of the fact that maybe they wasted 20 years of their life bitching about something
Yeah.
when, and that's even harder, right? Because now you've spent all this time. And when you realize that's not getting you anywhere, you don't want to face it. And I think that's why
Yeah.
people stay stuck where they are, is like admitting that to themselves of like, wow, I really spent 20 years talking about this. No one
Yeah.
cared. And it didn't help me. At the end of the day, like it didn't help them. And so then it's like, okay, what do I do now?
Now what? Yeah.
And most people, I think, are more comfortable choosing to stay in the cycle of that rather than choosing differently, because there's a level of self accountability of like, okay, I did that to myself, right? And that like sucks to feel and to accept. But if you can like face that in the mirror, accept that, be like, you know what? It's never too late. And like, I'm going to do something with this now or move forward from this now. You can still make a great life for yourself, whatever that looks like, whether that's like getting in shape or like moving forward in a different path or just rewriting your story, whatever it is. Um, but it's really hard to do the longer that it goes on.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite example is Train with Joan. Like,
Oh, yeah.
how freaking amazing, right? Like, it is never, ever, ever, ever too late to get
Well, explain
started
who she
on
is.
what?
Explain who she is so people know.
Yeah. So, God, how old is she? 70?
I don't know.
I think she's 70, but she like I think she started her fitness journeys like in her 60s or like 65 or something like that.
Yeah.
And she's literally on covers of magazines.
Yeah.
Like she's incredible because she's again, I think it really speaks to what we're touching on right now. It's like it is never too late. You are never too late to go after whatever that may be. And like we're talking about, in the context right now of like health and fitness. But yeah, it is really, really, really hard to accept like shit, like that was my fault and I'm in this position because of me. But it's also incredibly empowering to feel like, okay, but it's also up to me to fix this.
Mhm.
And it's up to me because, whenever we talk about, like if someone were to, God, this is such an awful analogy, but if someone were to put a gun to your head and say, you need to do this or you're dead, like who would you trust to get that done? Like because that's your life at stand. So it's like, I would trust me to do it rather than someone else. And so it is very empowering to know, okay, like I can do this. I'm in charge. Like, what can I start doing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you said too is like, I know it was me that put me in that position, but it could also have been something else, right?
Yeah.
And, like,
Yeah.
and if it was something else, it's almost harder because you have something else to blame,
Hmm.
and that sucks because then it's
Yeah.
like you have to come to acceptance that you just couldn't control it. Um, And that either way, right? Whether it's you or
Yeah.
it's something else, the
Well,
acceptance is the solve.
I was just thinking about David and Goliath. Have you read that book?
I mean, it's a Bible story.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's like it's a book called David and Goliath, but it's not about it's like there's
Oh,
a
different book.
it's a different book. Yeah. So they actually talk about how you think it's the big beast, right, that has the upper hand, has the advantage, but actually it's not. It's the little guy. Like they talk about like the situation and everything. And oftentimes you see someone who you think would be at a disadvantage, but they're actually not. And so they talk a lot about people who have like dyslexia or they have like learning disorders, and there are certain people who go, well, I can't read really well, so therefore I'm bad at school, therefore I'm not going to succeed, therefore, it's like they can take that and play the victim. Or you have people that go, well, I've got to figure out a way around this because I can't read good. So, like, they got to figure out a way around it, and they kind of like circumvent their situation and they kind of come out on top. And so I think there's like a crazy statistic about people who own Fortune 500 companies and how many CEOs are dyslexic or have some sort of learning disorder,
Yeah.
because they've had to find ways to be successful, not the traditional way. And so you have this path. Essentially, it's like I can either let this, whether this thing is something else, whether it's a learning disability or an injury or a disability, whatever it may be, or it's you, and you can say, well, this is like I am the way that I am because of this thing, and this is how it'll always be. Or I get to change my situation, and it might be harder for me, but I can still choose to be successful. It may take me
Right.
longer, but like you are in control of that.
Right. Well, and it's acceptance towards whatever the circumstances are that make it harder for you, right? It's like you can live your life resenting that and saying, this is making me worse, this is setting me back, or you can just accept that it is and then work with, around, through it, however you need to work with it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I really wasn't anticipating like the acceptance piece to be like the missing piece, but I think it actually is really just that missing piece that no one really talks about. I have never heard anybody speak on this topic until one of my coaches on my team spoke on this topic, and it was a hit. And it's a hard concept. It's definitely not sexy. It's definitely yeah, y'all probably don't want to hear it, but but that's why we're here, to tell you that secret. And then the following step from acceptance is, because that can sound very like, okay, cool, it is what it is, but it's like you have to continue practicing that acceptance through your journey. But the next step there is, okay, I accept my situation, and your situation may be at a disadvantage. You might be at a different starting point than you wanted to be. You might have regrets, you might have remorse, you might have resentment. But with all of those things, where do you start? And where you start is often just 20 times smaller than you think it needs to be. When you're thinking about, let's just keep it in the umbrella, weight loss, health and fitness, we think, okay, and this is actually really funny. So, the like office hour that I hold for our business mentorship, and all these coaches come on and they all are asking questions, and they all fall under similar themes, but it's like, hey, this client's struggling. They said it's too much. What? I don't know what they mean. I literally gave them like the simplest thing. Do I need to dumb it down more? Is like, that's like the feedback I get. And I'm like, so what were their protocols? And they'll say like calories, protein, steps, water, sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, where? And then I'll ask the next question. I do this every time. It's like, I'm realizing it's the same sequence. What were they doing before they started with you? None of it. Okay. So do you see that there's kind of a large gap between those two things? And they're like, I guess, but like, this is simple stuff. No, it's not.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Like, I'm laughing about it, but like, I've also been there.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've
And
100% been in that boat.
yeah, and I've been frustrated in like years past with clients in that same way. But now I know better, so I will teach better, but I will also laugh about it. And no shame to any of those people that have said that, because it's a lot of people that have asked
Yeah.
that question. But it's just like considering where someone's starting in that place. It's like, first of all, accepting your situation where you're starting is hard enough as it is. And then to look at this mountain of things and tasks that you need to do in order to get to where you want to be, like, then it just feels impossible, right? And then you're just more upset at yourself for being where you are, because
Yeah.
it's like, well, if I had just kept up with it, then this wouldn't be in front of me right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And we've talked about this too in the context of like, okay, maybe you compare yourself to like college and you're like, that was the best I ever looked. And it's like, well, all you had to do is class. You had no other
Yeah.
responsibilities. You didn't have children. You didn't have a job. Like, you had all this free time. Like, yeah, you could go to the gym for 2-3 hours and you had that time and you could do whatever you want. But, and I see this a lot with our clientele. Obviously we work with moms, is they compare themselves to who they were pre-kids.
Yeah.
And they feel like, okay, well, what I used to do was go to the gym for 2 hours. I had these 2-hour leg days. I was tracking my macros. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay, I hear you. And I know that that's what you feel like you need to do in order to get results, but we don't have that time anymore. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times it's like, one client I just interviewed recently, she had those same thoughts. And we are like, hey, let's just try to get in one workout. And if you can only get in the first 10 minutes of that workout, that's okay. Because your son wakes up, or, whatever happened, that he wakes up early or something, whatever. And that was really, really hard mentally for her to get over, because she was like, what is the point of doing 10 minutes of exercise? Because
Doesn't count.
she was used, yeah, it doesn't count. I didn't get to finish the whole workout. And it was really hard. And a lot of people won't do that, because they think like, well, it's again, it's like this all or nothing mentality. I'm either all in, I'm doing 75 hard, I'm doing this extreme program, or I'm doing nothing at all. And over time, those 10 minutes maybe turned into 15, or, she did a little bit here and there, and then she started to see results. And that was huge for her. She was like, how is this possible?
Mm-hmm.
And so she didn't, I mean, we see it now and she's like, well, duh. But at the time it didn't make sense. But she was like, well, 10 minutes one day and 10 minutes the next day. And she's like, the next thing I knew, I had gotten in anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes of exercise for the whole week. But that's what she thought she needed to do every single day. And so it was really, really eye opening for her. But that is really tough mentally, to go from this place of, this is what I used to do, so this is what I know, and this is like what I think I need to do to see results, to then just doing a little bit every single day and just being a little bit more consistent.
Yeah. And so it's just like, yeah, you really have to think even smaller. And the words that my coach on my team used was tiny habits.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny, like as small as you possibly can, because if you can just, and the way I see it is like, if you can just build any sort of positive momentum, then you're going to win more than if you just have this mountain of things that you're constantly just trying to chip away at and you never actually feel like you're getting anywhere. So it's like food challenges. It's like you feel like when you have the food challenge and I don't know, we've been watching a few of them lately, but like they have this big dish of food and they've been eating for 30 minutes and you look at the bowl and it's like, it doesn't even look like it's changed. It's like that. It's like, that's how attacking your weight loss journey looks when you're putting too much on your plate. So just going as small as you can. With the example of like the coaches that were frustrated that I used was just like, okay, so if you think calories and protein and 8,000 steps a day and a gallon of water and, managing all these things is small, then how do we go tiny? Like, what if we just, and like, I think here's a tactical example for you. If you're like, I'm starting my journey and I don't even know where to start, and this is a lot, and I have tracked calories before, I've done keto, I've done all these things and they've worked, but I don't have the space to do that. What if you just like looked at what you were eating and like just like picked one thing to swap out every day. Like a lot of times people struggle even just with like cooking from home as a habit. Like they just eat out all the time. And it's like, well, you could do one of two things, in my opinion. You could just change what you order when you're eating out, or you could cook one additional meal from home. Like both of those to me, I'm like, okay, that I know that I've gotten the reaction from clients before where they just look relieved like multiple times with either of those suggestions. They're like, really? Oh, yeah, I can get the grilled nuggets at Chick-fil-A. Okay, great. Let's do that. And like pair it with the fries. Like I don't care, just like make a little swap, right? And those things can really build a lot of what's important here is self-efficacy, because especially if you're the type of person, bring it back to the beginning, that's like, it's me, I'm the problem, discipline, motivation, willpower. These people have really low self-efficacy because this whole time we've been bashing on ourselves saying, I can't do it. I can't follow through. When that's not true, the goalpost has been way too far ahead of you. So build your self-efficacy by building up things that will give you just positive momentum. Anything is a win. And then like actually celebrate it. Actually celebrate it. And
Yep.
intentionally celebrate it, because you're not gonna want to. You're gonna be like, that's not good enough. That doesn't count. But if you're going to build momentum in this way, it's not gonna feel like it counts for a while. So you have to figure out how to celebrate it.
Yeah. And again, I know we always plug coaching, but that's one of the great things about working with a coach, because we are so hard on ourselves. And it's, again, I keep kind of referencing the same client, but she was like, I was so hard on myself. She had a prep background, right? So she's done bodybuilding shows before. And so her week, she'd come in and talk to her coach, be like, it was an utter failure. I did XYZ, da 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 da. And her coach would be like, yeah, but you did this and you
Yeah.
did that. And she's like, oh, yeah, I did. And so it helped give her momentum, because she was like, I felt like I was failing the first like couple months. And she's like, and there was no way that I would have continued had I been on my own, because I couldn't see the small positives in my week or what I was doing well, because I was so focused on the negative. So I almost like if you are doing this by yourself, almost kind of like, okay, how would I, if my friend came to me and told me how their week went and it was my week, how would I have approached it? Would I have been like, yeah, you suck. Like that was an awful week. Like give up. Like, no, you'd be like, wow, that was a great start. You did this. Look at all this moment. Like, and that's kind of that's the encouragement you need to give yourself. And it may seem really silly, because it's like, you don't want to feel like you're just celebrating like something little, but sometimes that's what you need. That's what
Oh
you
yeah.
need to keep going and to continue with that momentum. And it is really hard to think like, this isn't going to get me anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you do that day in, day out, week in, week out, the next thing you know, like, oh my God, I'm down 5-10 pounds. And like, all I did was switch my Chick-fil-A order. All I did was go from 5 sodas to 4 sodas, and I have a little bit more water, or I've added in a 10-minute walk to my day, or all I've done is just added in a serving of fruits and vegetables. Like they really, really do go a long way. But the approach that we've been taught is extreme, extreme, extreme. It needs to suck. It needs to be like really hard. I need to do this, do that, do this. And it is really hard to just, nope, just be consistent, just eat my grilled nuggets and like, and keep going.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's just, yeah, it's really, I really admire. I think I've talked about him before. I have a cousin on Aaron's side of the family
Yeah.
that he's just made like 2 changes over the past like 4 years, and it's just drastically improved the quality of his life. And it's like small shifts make such a big difference and have such a big ripple effect on the psychology, on the physiology, and it is really, really impressive. So if you could just have patience, take some of that pressure off. Like as soon as you take the pressure off, especially if you're a high pressure, high achieving person, God, the game changes. Like it really does.
Yeah.
But I will say one more thing though about celebrating wins, because I think it's like acceptance, tiny habits, celebrate the wins that's the secret. That's the secret to you gaining momentum and actually getting out of this cycle for good. But celebrating wins sometimes is also acknowledging the lack of losses. So I use this example a lot. If you binge eat 7 nights a week, going down to 5 nights is a win, but it is a subtraction of losses. And that's harder to recognize than like a positive step. And
Mhm.
so there's kind of two ways to look at it. And I think we often just overlook the latter. So I did want
Yeah.
to mention that.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to shout out my dad and stepmom because I went to go visit them last fall in Florida, and I forget what they were making lunch or something, and my dad was like, "Oh, do you want barbecue sauce on that?" And my initial reaction was, "Oh, no, that's okay." Because I know, like, okay, it's gonna
Yeah.
be loaded with sugar. Like, that's just no, I'm okay. And he goes, "Oh, we have this like low sugar option or like a reduced sugar option." He pulled out like I don't know if it was G Hughes or something, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh," I was like, yeah, sure. Like that'd be great. And I was like, when do you, and he's like, oh, we've just been like looking at food labels and making some swaps. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, and he goes, yeah, I've actually lost like quite a bit of weight. And like, it's, yeah. And they've always kind of like, I remember them doing kind of like the keto and the Adkin, or not keto, but Adkins and like, some stuff. And then for them to just have made some nice, simple swaps and like, it was just really cool. Like my coaching heart was just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is amazing. But yeah, they were like, yeah, we're just kind of doing a few things here and there. And the fact that they've seen progress it's really awesome. But yeah, it's like really, really just do not underestimate the power of tiny habits, small habits, completed day in and day out. And it's not willpower. It's not more discipline. It's not a detox. It's not pills and shakes or a vibrating, I don't know, ab machine thing. um, and it's really, again, I think it is really empowering to know at the end of the day, like it is up to you and you can dictate your success.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, guys. Well, hopefully you feel a little bit more relieved after listening to this episode and feeling like, oh, thank God I don't have to go waste $500 on this new diet. But hopefully you got a lot out of it. And if you haven't already, please make sure you are subscribed to the podcast. You can follow me at Christina Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness on Instagram. And we hope to see you back next week.